Yo, this is Tom, and in this video I'm going to show you how to configure the best WP Rocket settings. Hopefully this will help you pass Core Web Vitals and at least get you a better GTmetrix report. I already wrote an extensive tutorial on this, which I'll leave a link to in the video description, but I'll try to make this as quick and painless as possible. If you haven't signed up for WP Rocket yet, you can get a 10% off coupon code by signing up for their email list, and I'll drop a link to this page in the video description. It is an affiliate link, which helps me make these videos, so thank you for your support. Otherwise, we'll dive right into it. In the dashboard tab, I don't recommend using Rocket CDN. Generally, there are better CDNs out there. Most people recommend Cloudflare or Bunny CDN if you look at Facebook groups. I blurred everyone's name out to keep their privacy. QuickCloud is also good if you're using a Lightspeed server, but I probably wouldn't use Rocket CDN or StackPath. You can also clear the cache and regenerate critical CSS. If you make CSS changes and they don't appear on your website, then that should fix it. You can also choose to opt in for Rocket Analytics. I choose not to share my data because of a slight performance decrease. I choose not to share any of my plugin data just because of performance reasons, but that is up to you. In the cache tab, you want to enable mobile caching, but you don't want to enable separate cache for mobile devices if you're using a responsive theme, which I assume most of you are. WP Rocket says only enable it if you have a dedicated mobile theme or a plugin, so generally keep it disabled. User cache should also be disabled in most cases unless you're using something like bbPress where multiple users can log into your website and they need their own cache version, or you have some sort of other restricted content on your website. But most of you don't and should leave this disabled. Cache lifespan, you can actually increase this if you don't publish content a lot, and this will rebuild the cache less frequently, and it can actually save you server resources. You've probably heard of CPU limits on shared hosting and SiteGround and other hosts, and if you're getting those issues and you're overloading your server, you can actually try increasing this. But if you run a news website and you want the cache updated more frequently, you should actually decrease this. I probably would just leave this for 10 days for the majority of websites. Otherwise, depends on how often you publish content and how often you need the cache regenerated. In the file optimization tab, you'll notice a lot of settings are grayed out, and that's because I'm using Autoptimize on top of WP Rocket. It gives you a lot better control of how your JavaScript and CSS is optimized. So here are the settings I use. Optimize JavaScript code, aggregate JavaScript files. Same thing with CSS, and I also aggregate inline CSS files. I definitely recommend trying Auto-Optimize and Async JavaScript on top of WP Rocket. So in this case, since it's already being taken care of, that's why they are grayed out. Otherwise, I would definitely minify CSS files, but I would not always combine CSS or JavaScript files. WP Johnny wrote a nice article on why you shouldn't always combine, and the bottom line can be found in the very last sentence. It basically says, if your total CSS and JavaScript is about 10 kilobytes or less, you can probably combine, but if it's more than that, then you should not combine. What you want to do is look at your GTmetrix waterfall chart and look at your CSS tab right here and see if it's over or under 10 kilobytes. Same thing with your JavaScript. So smaller websites should usually combine and larger websites should usually not combine. Optimized CSS delivery can cause layout shifts. If you look at your GTmetrix report and you have a cumulative layout shift score above 0, then you might want to disable it in WP Rocket, and there's been a lot of reports of that fixing layout shifts. Otherwise, you can try enabling it, and what you're going to want to do is first set a fallback critical CSS. Go to a free critical CSS generator, enter your website, grab the critical CSS, and paste it into WP Rocket. The next step is to make sure Optimized CSS is working, and the way you're going to do that is by viewing your source code and search for rocket-critical-css. WP Rocket also gives you some examples on how they modify your files when you enable this, but that's how you test to make sure the optimized CSS is working. Also, if you experience issues either with optimized CSS or minify CSS, they do have a helper plugin to exclude certain files. And same thing with minify. If you enable this and it breaks your website, you're going to want to view the source code, find any problematic files, and exclude them from minification. So in the beta version of WP Rocket, they have an option to remove unused CSS. I could have had that, but I had to roll back to the previous version. But I want to cover this really quickly. So this isn't a magical option that's going to fix your Lighthouse item. CSS and JavaScript are created mostly by plugins and heavy page builders like Elementor and Divi. You're going to see a lot of people in Facebook groups moving away from those page builders to Oxygen Builder, GeneratePress, Cadence Theme, and even Genesis Framework. They're much more lightweight than Elementor or Divi, so if you use one of those page builders, you're going to need to selectively disable CSS and JavaScript using asset cleanup, or perf matters is also good. You also want to try and hard code your menu, header, footer, and sidebar to remove all the stuff that Elementor or Divi adds and just create it in CSS, which is way faster. I personally removed Elementor with the help of WP Johnny and replaced it with Gutenberg, and that made a huge improvement. So I just want to point out that the remove unused CSS option isn't a miracle worker. You're going to want to go to the source, which are probably your page builders and plugins, and figure out what is creating all that CSS and JavaScript, and try to trim it down instead of just selecting this option. Minified JavaScript files should be enabled. So like I said, Autoptimize is already taking care of this, so it's grayed out in WP Rocket. Load JavaScript deferred is enabled, which helps eliminate render blocking JavaScript. And on top of this, I would also try the Async JavaScript plugin. So when you activate this plugin, you're gonna see an option to either apply async or defer. In most cases, I would just click apply defer and retest your website and see how it reacts, because I personally got really good results with this plugin. Delayed JavaScript execution is mainly used for third-party code, which you can find in GTmetrix or Lighthouse. So you're going to see all this third-party code on your website. Usually it's from Google Fonts, Tag Manager, Analytics, and they automatically create a list of JavaScript to delay, which you can also find on this page right here. So in the new versions of WP Rocket, I notice that they don't give you an option to add additional JavaScript to delay. So if you need to do that, you can do it with perf matters or flying scripts, but I want to show you exactly what this does. So if you go to my website, I have WP Discus and Gravitars are delayed, and those are my comments. They don't load initially, but they only load upon user interaction. So when you scroll down the page or you touch the screen on mobile, that's when they will load. So it really saves off my initial load time. So I want you to view my scroll bar on the right side of the page and watch as you scroll down, it's going to jump, and that's when my comments are loaded. It doesn't load initially, it only loads until people scroll down the page. So it's very, very helpful because I have so many comments on my blog to delay that JavaScript. But you can also do it with AdSense and a lot of other third-party code in your Lighthouse report. I just want to make sure, give a little warning out that if you do it with AdSense, you should make sure it doesn't impact your revenue, and same thing with database plugins that track, analytics, that it doesn't interfere with any of that, because if you delay it too long or something, it can impact your revenue and data. But that's what delayed JavaScript is. In the media settings, WordPress 5.5 already has lazy load built in, but you can enable this if you want. You also want to enable lazy load for iframes and videos, replace the YouTube iframe with a preview image. What this does is it basically only loads that preview image when the page is loaded. So when people actually click the play button, that's when the fat YouTube player is loaded. If you embed a lot of videos on your blog or website, this can really reduce your load time. Excluded images. You want to exclude all above the fold images from lazy load. It would be really counterintuitive to lazy load my logo and my sidebar, so that's why I have both of those excluded from lazy load, and you should do the same with any above the fold images. Add missing image dimensions means some of your images don't have a width or height attribute in the HTML, and this will add it automatically. So if you look at Lighthouse and see a use explicit width and height recommendation, then this should fix it. And it can also fix layout shift issues. Disable WordPress embed should be enabled, especially if you have really high quality images on your website. Sometimes other website owners will copy and paste your images on their website and will suck up your bandwidth. So this prevents them from doing that, and it's similar to Cloudflare's hotlink protection. I would enable it. You don't need to enable WebP caching. Even if you're using WebP images, you're probably using ShortPixel, Imagify, or even WebP Media Converter to create those WebP images. So those plugins will not only create, but they'll also serve the WebP images. WP Rocket does not create WebP images, it only helps serve them. So since your plugin probably already does that, you don't need to enable it here. In the Preload tab, you want to activate preloading, sitemap preloading. I recommend Rank Math. If you haven't switched from Yoast to Rank Math, I probably would. Preload links makes it so whenever users hover over a link, that page will download in the background, so by the time they actually click it, it pretty much loads instantly. It doesn't affect Lighthouse scores, but it is a nifty little feature that can make your website look faster. Prefetch DNS requests. What you want to do for this is view your reduce impact of third-party code item in GTmetrix or Lighthouse, and copy all the domains that are loaded and paste them into the prefetch DNS requests. A better method is to actually just view my list of common domains to prefetch. Usually these are Google Fonts, Google Analytics, YouTube, Facebook, if you have social sharing buttons on your blog, and other third-party code. So what prefetching does is basically helps browsers anticipate these third-party resources to make them load a little bit faster. I actually borrowed this list from Luke. I don't want to take full credit for the list. I added some things to it, but this is where most of the list came from. For preloading fonts, you want to first look at your GTmetrix waterfall chart and click the Fonts tab right here. The first step to optimizing fonts is to make sure they're hosted locally on your server. So if you hover over these, you'll see they're all being served from onlinemediamasters.com and not fonts.gstatic.com or FontAwesome. So by serving them from my local server, that is the first step to optimizing fonts, and you always want to make sure you're minimal with the number of font families, weights, and icons. After that, you can actually click them, copy the URL, and paste them into the Preload tab. You want to be careful with how many fonts you preload, because if you do too many, it can actually have a negative impact on your performance. So always test your preloaded fonts, and especially if they load across your entire website, then they're probably safe to preload. I usually don't do anything in the Advanced Rules tab. WP Rocket already automatically excludes cart and checkout and account pages from e-commerce sites, so there's usually nothing to do here. I want to cover two main things in the Database tab. First of all, most things are safe to delete, but post revisions, if you need backups of your old posts, then you shouldn't delete those. You can always limit post revisions with a simple line of code or perf matters, but if you need backups of your old posts, then I would not delete these. Otherwise, you can. Most other things are safe to delete. Weekly is fine for the automatic cleanup frequency. The next thing I want to cover is that WP Rocket doesn't let you delete old plugin tables. WP Optimize is basically a database cleanup plugin, and it lets you do everything in WP Rocket, but it also lets you clean up unused tables from old plugins that were installed. So if you find yourself installing plugins and deleting them and installing more and deleting them, they're going to leave junk in your database and you want to delete them. So search for plugins that are not installed on your website anymore and you can remove them. Of course, anything with your database, you should always take a backup just as a precaution, but that is how you actually do a more thorough cleaning of your database. In the CDN tab, the first thing you have to decide is which CDN are you going to use. If you're going to be using Bunny CDN or Key CDN or anyone that uses a CDN URL, then you will use this tab to set it up. If you're going to be using Cloudflare's free CDN, then you're going to be changing name servers and using the Cloudflare tab. So just note that this section is going to be specifically for Bunny CDN, because most people recommend Bunny CDN in Facebook groups or Cloudflare. So it really depends on which one you want. Cloudflare is free, Bunny CDN is paid, and I'll drop a link to Bunny CDN in the video description. It's another shameless affiliate link, so thank you if you use it. So the first thing you want to do is sign up for Bunny CDN, and you're going to want to add a pull zone. You're going to add your website here, Online Media Masters. And then you're going to want to add your website here, your actual URL, onlinemediamasters.com. So once you do that, then you can actually select the locations you want to use. If you don't have any visitors in South Africa, you can disable it. Same thing with these areas. So check your Google Analytics data, see where your visitors are from, and learn which areas you want to use the CDN on. Once you do that, and you can create a pull zone right here. I already created one, so I'm just going to go to that. You're going to click it. You're going to want to copy your CDN URL here, and then paste it into WP Rocket. Then enable Content Delivery Network, and that is all you need to do to set up a CDN. In the Heartbeat tab, this consumes server resources, and you should generally disable it. What the Heartbeat API does is it shows you real-time plugin notifications when other users are editing a post, but if you don't have multiple users editing things on your website, then you can disable it. Otherwise, I would at least reduce it. So the default Heartbeat comes every 15 seconds, I believe. So reducing it goes to 2 minutes, and that puts a lot less stress on your server since it doesn't need to constantly run every 15 seconds. But I would disable it if you can. In the Add-ons tab, WP Rocket recently integrated Google Tracking and Facebook Pixel, and they incorporated that into the delayed JavaScript execution list. So you probably won't see this anymore here, but they probably will have Varnish here still. So I use Cloudways Vultr High Frequency plan, but I do have Varnish disabled. So if you look at my Cloudflare settings, I have Redis enabled and Memcache, but I have Varnish disabled. And that's simply because I've heard a lot of reports of Varnish actually slowing down your website instead of speeding it up. And as soon as I disabled Varnish, I thought the same thing. So I do not have that enabled. That's mainly for cloud hosting. And if you want to sign up for Cloudways, I'll drop an affiliate link in the video description. They're really good. Their Vultr High Frequency plan is amazing. It's cloud-based hosting, and time to first byte is very good. And for add-ons, you're going to want to activate this if you plan on using Cloudflare, and same with Sucuri. I think I pronounced that right. Now let's get into Cloudflare. The first step is to sign up for a Cloudflare account and add a website. So go ahead and add your website, and select the free plan, and Cloudflare is going to scan your DNS and prompt you to continue. If you are using GoDaddy or Namecheap for your DNS, it's very slow, and I would use Cloudflare regardless because their DNS is much faster. But they basically tell you to remove your default name servers and replace it with Cloudflare's. So what you're going to do is go to your domain registrar. Mine is GoDaddy's. So I'll click my domain, manage my DNS, and then I can see my name servers here. So I already updated these, but if you haven't, you're going to basically delete these name servers and replace them with the ones Cloudflare gave you. And after that, you can use the Claire Chrome extension to make sure Cloudflare is working. It basically is a little thing that turns orange if you're using Cloudflare. And that's all you have to do to set up Cloudflare. It can take 24 hours to propagate, so just be patient. And the next thing I want to do is walk you through some basic Cloudflare settings. So go to the Speed tab and go to Optimization, and make sure Minify HTML, CSS, and JavaScript are turned off if your cache plugin is doing that. So since you already use WP Rocket or Auto-Optimize for it, then you can disable it in Cloudflare. Brotli is faster than gzip, and that's why I have it enabled. The Cloudflare APO is super handy, but it is not compatible with WP Rocket yet. I hope it is soon. But once it is compatible, I would definitely try this out. It's $5 a month, but I've heard great things, especially, faster time to first byte and so forth. Be on the lookout if WP Rocket makes it compatible. Rocket Loader can break your website. You can try enabling it. I've heard it does wonders for some. It breaks a lot of websites for others, but I have it disabled. I have SG Railgun enabled, and there's a few other things I want to cover. For page rules, the main two page rules I recommend are the cache everything page rule. So just put your website and put cache everything as the cache level. And the next thing you want to do is for the WordPress admin. So set the security level to high, bypass the cache so the cache is not running inside the admin. And then you'll want to disable apps and performance features inside the admin. So like Rocket Loader or SG Railgun and stuff like that isn't running inside the admin. And they also have a lot of other cool features like bot protection, some firewall rules, and hotlink protection in here. You can choose, what you want to do. But those are the main two I recommend. Configure the speed, optimization, and the page rules. You also want to enter your global API key and your zone ID, which you can find in your Overview tab. So if you scroll down, you'll see your zone ID, and you'll also see a link to get your API token here. Enter the same email address you used to sign up for Cloudflare, and that's really all you need to do for Cloudflare. Image optimization. WP Rocket wants you to use Imagify because they own it, but most people are using ShortPixel. It's more popular and it has better reviews than Imagify, but you can do whatever you want. Tools. You can export settings, import them, and roll back to a previous version of WP Rocket if the new one is causing issues, which I've had to do before. And they also have some tutorials at the bottom. So the last thing I want to show you is a nifty little trick to fix the serve static assets with an efficient cache policy item that you might find in your Lighthouse report. So to do that, you're going to want to edit your .htaccess. If you don't know how, you can install the WP htaccess editor plugin, and then look at the code created by WP Rocket. They automatically set the cache expiration for most files to 4 months, but Google prefers 180 days. Don't ask me why. So you can change this to 6 months or 180 days, and that is where you change the cache expiration for your files. Another place to do this is in Cloudflare. Go to the caching tab, go to configuration, and the browser cache TTL. So 6 months is about equivalent to 180 days, which is recommended by Google, so you can try changing it there. And finally, your hosting might also have a cache expiration, so be sure to check there too and set it to 180 days. And that is WP Rocket in a nutshell. I hope this was helpful. I'll drop a link to all the tools I recommended in the video description. They're probably going to be all affiliate links, but I appreciate you using them. Peace out.